Hey guys, Evil here for Vanquish Products. Today I'm happy to tell you about the new Currie licensed F9 axle housing for your axial-based scaler. Currie Enterprises is a respected name in the full-size racing world. That is why they are the perfect partner for VP's next scale project. The F9 is a legendary design, and it's instantly recognizable. That's why we thought it would be a great addition to our lineup. These parts were machined from the highest grade billet aluminum to maintain the quality and finish that you would expect from Vanquish. Also, the machining technique to simulate welds on steel plate were brought over from our popular rock jock axle to continue that long-standing dedication to scale realism in our designs. The full-size F9 has plenty of innovations that come with it, and the scale version for your SCX10 is no exception. VP has integrated a third member assembly to increase scale realism, but it also puts access to the ring and pinion on the back of the axle, just like the full-size version. Speaking of the pinion, the internal pinion bearing has been massively upsized from the stock dimensions to help the F9 withstand higher horsepower demands. It also utilizes the new bearing carrier system that debuted in the AR60 V2 to solidify the spool in place and reduce overall flex. In short, all of these innovations make the F9 one of the toughest axle housings on the market. Assembling your F9s is pretty straightforward. We've prepared this video to walk you through the process if you'd like to build along. Included in the axle kit are the axle truss, bearing retainers, axle pumpkin and third member, oversized pinion bearing, axle tubes, and suspension mounts. Not pictured is the complete hardware package to assemble the F9s. To complete the installation, you'll need to supply your own CVDs, axle shafts, bearings, C-hubs, knuckles and hexes, lockers, and gears. I like to start by installing the 3x6 grub screws. These are here to protect threads and keep contaminants from entering the internals of the axle. As with all metal-to-metal connections, we recommend you use some blue thread lock here to help keep everything in place. Next, I move on to transplanting my stock outer pinion bearing to the third member, followed by the included oversized pinion bearing. Then I drop in my pinion gear. Next up, we'll need to install the bearing retainers on your old locker and bolt it in place to the third member. For this step, we'll use the larger M3 by 8mm screws. Once that is done, we can join the third member to the pumpkin using the M2 by 6mm screws. And finally, with the third member in place, we can then install the 164 by 0.25 cosmetic screws. Once those steps are complete, it's time to install the axle tubes. Note the orientation of the tubes and install them into the pumpkin. Lightly tighten the M3 by 6mm grub screw, just enough to hold them in place because we're going to have to adjust them later. You'll notice that the axle tubes have many holes drilled in them. These are for use with other VP accessories that are coming out in the future. For now, we're only going to use one for this build, so we use the included M3 by 4mm grub screws with a little bit of thread lock to seal the unused holes. Now I'm going to install the suspension mounts with the M3 by 8 socket head screws, followed by the axle truss. Here is where you'll need to loosen the grub screws retaining the axle tubes to adjust the axle tube so that the truss mounting points will line up. Once the truss is installed, you can snug them back down since we should not have to remove them again. This completes the F9 front axle build. From this point forward, I'm going to be using optional accessories to complete the build. The Vanquish SCX10 VVDs, 8-degree knuckles and C-hubs, and 12mm hexes are available separately on vanquishproducts.com, but it's important to note that your stock axle takeoffs will work just fine. With that complete, let's move on to the rear axle. The axle tubes build just a little bit different than the front, so we're going to go through them briefly. Assemble the third member. It will build exactly the same as the front. Now let's assemble the rear axle tubes. First, we'll need to install the 5x11x4 axle bearings. Next, use a set of snap ring pliers to install the retainer ring that holds the bearings in place. It might be easier to do this with the axle shaft removed. Once that is installed, you can reinsert the axle shaft and install the cross pin and hex to hold it in place. Once both axle tubes are assembled, we can join them to the center pumpkin. Again, only lightly tighten the set screws, just enough to hold them in place while we install the axle truss. We're also going to seal up some mounting holes in the axle tube, noting here which ones to leave open for the truss hardware. I also use some M3x6 grub screws to protect the threads on these unused mounting holes in the pumpkin. This step is optional. Make any alignment adjustments necessary to mount the truss, and then tighten up all of the hardware. Use an M3 grub screw to seal up the final hole in the bottom of the pumpkin. Now just install your lower suspension mounts, and that completes the rear F9 build. We're now ready to install them on my SCX10. It's important to know that your stock links will not work with the F9s, so you'll need to fabricate your own, or if you prefer, Vanquish has a purpose-built 8-piece titanium set available. Part number VPS07860 used here. From this point forward, I'll be installing using this link kit. A diagram is included with your link kit to show you what link goes where on the truck. But first, we'll need to install the Traxxas rod ends on all of the links. It's important to know that this link kit is a 4-link kit, so I'll be mounting my servo on the axle. To do this, I'm going to be using the optional SCX10 axle servo mount, part number VPS04450. Before we can install it, however, we must install the front upper links. Note the orientation of the bend before you fix them in place. This is very important for your suspension to work properly. With these installed, we can now mount the servo mount. Simply tighten it in place using 4 screws followed by the servo itself. We're now ready to bolt the axle up to the truck. Remove your old links and bolt the F9s in place using the new links. Make sure to cycle your suspension and look for any binding or contact that might hinder movement of the axle. Check your pinion angles to make sure they look right, and if any angle looks too extreme, you might have some links installed in the wrong place on the truck. Hook up your drive shafts and steering linkage, install your wheels, and you're ready to hit the trail. We're extremely pleased with the final look and performance of the Vanquish F9, and we think you will be too. These are currently available in SCX10 length axle tubes, but more sizes will follow in the future. Head out to vanquishproducts.com to order a set now, or find them at your local VP authorized dealer. Thanks for watching today. We'll catch you on the next one.